a very interesting situation happening in Washington State that I wanted to learn a little more about. Washington State had a public referendum on the ballot last year, last November. It was called Initiative 1639. And basically what it called for was that purchasers of semi-automatic weapons now have to be 21 years old or over. They have to undergo an enhanced background check. They have to have completed a safety course. Now, this is semi-automatic rifles. And they have to wait 9 days before they can take possession of their weapons. And this is all basically to discourage people who on impulse run in, buy a gun, and go out and shoot up a school, that kind of thing. I mean, that was the intent of it. And there's also a provision that if they fail to store their weapons safely, they find themselves at risk of the crime of community endangerment. And this is what's going on with this. And so, the good citizens of Washington State passed this law. Majority of them voted for it. It became law. The legislature certified it. The governor signed it, or however whatever the process is. And now more than half of the sheriffs in the state of Washington are saying, we're not going to enforce this law. And I'm wondering, what's up with this? On the line with us is Sheriff Richard Mack. He's the founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. He's on the board of the Oath Keepers, oathkeepers.org. He's the former sheriff of Graham County, Arizona. CSPOA.org is the website. You can tweet him at Sheriff Mack, M-A-C-K. And Sheriff Mack, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've talked.
Thanks for having me, Tom. It's always good to be with you.
Thank you. So what's going on here? What is the rationale that these sheriffs are using to argue that they can defy the law of the state?
Well, they're trying to keep the oath of office. They're trying to enforce the Constitution. Every one of these sheriffs has sworn an oath of allegiance to the Constitution of Washington, to the Constitution of the United States, and they're trying to keep their word and their oaths. And in a democracy, they would probably be doing the wrong thing. In a constitutional republic, they're doing exactly what they promised to do. Seeing how America was never intended to be a democracy, they are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they are adhering to the will of the people in their counties. It's really not fair for Seattle, that controls the major population of the state, to force down all the counties in the state down their throats what they believe should be what's going on.
Yeah, I get the geopolitics of this, that basically the argument that's being made, particularly by some rural counties, is we didn't vote for this thing. The majority of our people certainly didn't vote for it. Seattle's this huge area, and you got a bunch of liberals there, and they voted for it, and they're the majority of the state, and therefore, and in fact, a number of counties have actually passed resolutions saying that they disagree with it, or even, arguing that it shouldn't be enforced in their counties. But I don't get how this is constitutional. Is there a constitutional right to own an assault weapon without any regulation in the state of Washington's Constitution?
Yeah, actually there is, Tom. And first you have to go beyond that, Tom. Do the people have the right in any state or in this country, or do politicians have any right or authorization to pass gun control laws? First you have to ask, does this legislative body have the authority to pass this law? That is never questioned when legislative action is taken in this country.
Well, this wasn't a legislative body. This was the people of the state.
I want to get your other question. Do the people of this country have the authority and the right to vote away rights of other people? If the people of Seattle wanted to reinstitute slavery, would you be making the same argument? Well,
no, but what about my right not to have my child shot up at school?
You have that right, but this law is not going to make that happen. If you want to know the truth of the matter is we should be making sure our schools are armed with trained people who know what they're doing to make sure that we don't do this.
But Sheriff Mack, you know the statistics. The more guns there are in an area, the more homicides, the more suicides, the more gun accidents there are. It's an absolute linear relationship. The more guns there are, the more.
first of all, I wrote a book about that. I dispelled all the myths and the propaganda and the brainwashing that the liberals have tried to feed our country for the last 50 years. It's all a hoax. It's mistaken. It's not true. And just because
then why
gun
does
exists, you act like people are going to do something wrong with it?
Well, hang on just a second. We of all the guns in civilian hands in the entire world, all 7 billion people on Earth,
especially Switzerland,
we have 50% of the guns in civilian hands in the world. And we also had 40,000 people die as a consequence of guns last year. We are such an outlier. We are hundreds of percent higher than any other developed country in the world. I mean, we have gun death rates that are like with Afghanistan.
In every home there, and so your statistics are always going to be falling on the truth. And the truth is, Switzerland has never been involved in any war. They do not. They have the lowest gun violence of any country. And they are the safest country in the world.
If you have a gun in Switzerland, there are all kinds of regulations. Sheriff, you know this. There are all kinds of regulations in Switzerland about those guns. They have to be stored a certain way. They can only be used a certain way. They can only be transported a certain way. There are only certain places in public where you can carry a weapon in Switzerland. They are very heavily regulated. They are nowhere. Actually, they're more heavily regulated in Switzerland than this law in Washington State that your sheriff buddies are saying they're not going to enforce.
And good for them, because they're actually supporting freedom, and they're actually supporting liberty. And I already gave you a comparison that if Seattle voted to reinstitute slavery, are you going to say the same thing then? No, you're not. And no, and I'm not. And I would be on your side, which I'm very seldom.
But we're not talking about slavery. We're talking about guns.
Exactly. But we're also talking about laws and who can make them.
I mean, if Seattle voted to require everybody to eat 3 candy bars a day, I mean, come on, there are, nobody in this country is seriously suggesting a reinstitution of slavery. That is such a straw man argument.
But I'm giving you a hypothetical. That's what we're talking about.
But I'm not talking about hypotheticals. You've got actual sheriffs in Washington State who are saying, yes, the people of this state passed a law. It wasn't even a legislative body. It was the people.
Tom, I told you the answer to that. How come liberals can't get it when people are standing for liberty in this country? How come liberals do not support liberty?
What is liberty? What is
regulations?
Tell liberty to the parents of Newtown. Tell liberty to the parents of Parkland. Tell liberty to the people who were shot up in Las Vegas.
So
Richard, no other country on earth has this problem.
Liberal brainwashing is, if you have a problem, make a law against it, and we're all going to be safer if we take away law-abiding guns.
And you're saying that the problem are you trying to tell me that the problem that we have of mass shootings, which pretty much doesn't exist anywhere else on earth, that the problem that we have of 40,000 gun deaths a year, we're massively higher than any other country in the world in terms of those, that those problems are the consequence of too much liberty or not enough liberty? This makes no sense to me.
Yeah, we don't. I know liberals hate too much liberty, and I know you guys do.
Well, we're talking about too many guns here.
You have to follow the law whether you like it or not.
Well, that's what I'm saying to you. Don't these sheriffs have to follow the law whether they like it or not?
They are. It's called the Constitution of the state of Washington and the Constitution of the United States.
Then shouldn't they take, instead of refusing to enforce the law, instead of refusing to enforce the law, shouldn't they sue at the Supreme Court of the state of Washington, which adjudicates what is and isn't constitutional under the laws of the state of Washington, and try to win?
We're now back to following everything the courts tell us.
No, the Constitution of the state of Washington says if you disagree with the law, you appeal it to the Supreme Court.
No, you don't. You just got through talking about civil disobedience, and then now you're talking just the opposite. Tom, stand for freedom regardless of what the courts tell you. Stand for freedom regardless of what the legislature says.
So your definition of freedom, let me just get this straight. Your definition of freedom is ignoring laws passed by the people, refusing to enforce those laws if you're a sheriff, and refusing to do what the Constitution requires, which is appeal it to the Supreme Court.
They're supporting the higher law. They're supporting the higher law.
The higher law being the Constitution, right? Hang on a second, Richard. Your argument, I think you're shooting yourself in the foot, no pun intended here, with your argument, because your argument is that that the higher law is the Constitution and that the Constitution guarantees you a right to have a gun. The Constitution also requires that if you disagree with a law, that you take that to a court.
Okay, tell me where that is in the Constitution.
Well, I don't.
That is not in the Constitution.
In the United States Constitution, it's Article 3, Section 2. The Supreme Court shall have original appellate jurisdiction.
Okay, so you supported Plessy versus Ferguson and the segregation that stayed because of Plessy versus Ferguson for another
Again, we're not
60
talking about
years,
slavery here. We're talking about guns.
Okay, no. Tom.
And I was not alive in 1898. And I think if I were, I probably wouldn't have supported it.
So you're saying that as long as it's enacted, the law has to be obeyed, and Rosa Parks should have been arrested for not giving her seat to a white man because it was the law and the sheriff had to support it.
Rosa Parks was not a sheriff. She did not take an oath to uphold the law. And the law says if you don't like a law, you take it to the court.
So
why aren't you guys going to court?
Because that's ridiculous. Your premise is ridiculous, and it contradicts everything I've heard you say on your show thus far today.
What am I missing, Richard?
You only support that if it's to kill babies, but you don't support it if it's to stand for freedom.
What am I missing here? The Constitution.
You're missing the law. You're missing the supreme law.
The supreme law. The Constitution says if you don't like a law, you litigate it. Why are these sheriffs not suing instead of simply refusing to follow their oath to do what the Constitution says?
Okay, when I went to the Supreme Court, I did what you said, but the first judge said that I was forced to choose between keeping my oath to the Constitution or obeying the act. I'm telling you that when these sheriffs in Washington were forced to make that decision, they did the right and honorable thing, and they stood for individual liberty and the rights of the people they worked for. They don't work for Seattle people. They work for the people in their county. They did the right thing. They did exactly what we teach people to do. Stand for liberty first.
Okay, Richard, we're out of time here. You have the last word. Sheriff Richard Mack, the founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, Board of Directors of Oath Keepers, oathkeepers.org, cspoa.org, and you can tweet him at Sheriff Mack. Thank you, Sheriff Mack.